Asian Americans predominantly immigrate here for work reasons. They come from already wealthy countries. They're already wealthy when they get here. Crime is committed primarily...
Nah, no, you just made that up.
Do you think the average black kid in Compton is listening to Beethoven or some sort of gangster rap music that glorifies gangster culture?
Silly question. Rap wasn't created to glorify gangster culture.
Yes, it wasn't created to glorify gangster culture, but that's what it does.
Even though there is
okay,
rap,
I mean,
I'm sure
you're not
that's
answering,
doing
you're
that.
dodging the question because...
Okay, I'm sure they're listening to rap.
Okay.
Nah. Bro, I have to meet this man, bro.
In the CRT literature, what do they think of white people or whiteness?
Who would you like me to quote?
Kimberly Crenshaw.
I haven't read Kimberly Crenshaw.
She says that whiteness is a cancer or a toxin on our society.
The concept of whiteness, the racial concept of whiteness.
Okay, so what is whiteness?
The concept of whiteness. I remember watching the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington, and in that movie, one of the biggest scenes was when Denzel Washington or Malcolm X was in prison, they pulled out a Bible and the definition of whiteness was pure. And the definition of blackness or black was darkness, the absence of light, basically wrong. In that book, maybe she's referring to a concept such as that, whereas the color whiteness symbolizes purity and the color black doesn't. However, when I think about it in modern terms, when you say the concept of whiteness, I mean, it's a skin color. Like, really, it's a skin color, and we don't live in concepts. This is not a movie. So, anyways, let's continue. This video makes it clear why you should always think for yourself and not allow others to think for you. Because, as you can see, the student seems like they don't know what they're talking about. And this is why I use Ground News. Ground News is a site that offers purely objective and unbiased news, and by clicking my link, ground.news/LFRJojo, you can access this site with ease. Once you're interested in the story on Ground News, you'll have access to all the articles published per story in the coverage details section. You'll also be able to compare headlines of every single article published, so that you're aware how different media sources are conveying the same exact story. Another great feature is that Ground News highlights the ownership behind every single story, allowing you to discern if a piece is independently sourced or allowing you to know if an article is influenced by large entities or outside groups such as corporate interests or government funding. Today, there's a story about the Trump presidential campaign calling to debate Biden earlier and more times throughout the year. On the site, you can see that the left-leaning sources have the article titled as Team Orange formally demands more in earlier debates, and it puts an emphasis on Trump's minions, where the right-leaning sources have the article titled as Trump campaign demands Biden debate him much earlier and more often. From this, you can see that the left's main goal is to quite literally paint Trump as Team Orange and talk about his minions, whereas the right's main goal is to focus on Donald Trump's desire for debates to be held earlier and more often throughout the year. Within this, you can also see the media conglomerates publishing every single article and the factuality behind every article, which honestly I find pretty cool. You can't really see that anywhere else. My absolute favorite tool, however, is the news blind spot. The news blind spot features highlighted stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. This is extremely important because this feature actively tells you what both sides deem as unimportant. If you're tired of biased news, this is honestly your platform. Ground News is a vital resource that focuses on critical thinking and provides objective, fair, and accurate perspective. Currently, Ground News is offering their biggest sale of the year. You can receive a 40% discount on their Vantage subscription, which I personally use for my news analysis. Just visit ground.news/LFRJojo. I will repeat, ground.news/LFRJojo. I truly value what Ground News brings to the table, and if you're looking for something like this, you should tap in.
What is whiteness?
Yeah, define it.
As Kimberly Crenshaw would probably say, the sort of construction of privilege that comes with being white in this country.
Right. So what privilege do you and I as white people have that black people don't have?
Yeah, great question. On applications that are blindly judged, white-sounding names are often given the job more. They're paid more.
Not true. In fact, it's the opposite. There's black privilege right now. It's called affirmative action, where underqualified blacks are taking Asians and white people's places in universities across the country. True or false?
True.
Okay, so yeah, there's black privilege, not white privilege in this country.
I actually don't think affirmative action is how we address education inequality.
Okay, well, that affirmative action is still largely supported by the CRT regime. But let's get back to CRT, to the essence of it.
Sure.
CRT believes in one manifestation of its ideology is black-only dormitories. So white people are not allowed. Do you believe in black-only dormitories?
No, and I don't have to agree
Okay.
with
No,
every
you're
aspect
being
of an
fair.
ideology
Fine.
to argue for it.
So then what part of CRT do you like? Because they call whiteness a toxin, black-only dormitories, and if you want to talk about like ideological or intellectual sloppiness, the 1619 Project was...
I think it's very sloppy.
Okay, we agree. Nicole
I
Hannah-Jones...
think it's overstated, and I think some
You're
parts
being
are
fair.
inaccurate.
Okay, good.
The parts of CRT that I think are most relevant and, very factually, you can, what am I trying to say? There's a lot of evidence for them, is the fact that previous inequalities, such as the institution of slavery, such as our treatment of Native Americans, do in fact affect those populations today. And you were saying before, in inner cities, there's a lot more crime, and a lot of that is because of redlining and other practices that come directly from the mistreatment of minorities previous.
What I would say about this, I'm unsure, and I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm unsure if redlining has detriments today. There is a strong possibility that it does. However, if you're trying to use the argument of previous slavery as well as redlining to justify affirmative action or critical race theory being taught in schools and using that as a reasoning behind African Americans or black people, it's not just black people. It would be African Americans, because you have to actually classify your nationality on college applications now. It's not for Nigerian Americans or Ghanaian Americans. It's specifically for African Americans. But anyways, if you're trying to use redlining and slavery to justify why black people get an advantage when it comes to applying to schools and when it comes to jobs, I don't think that's arguing in good faith. I don't, because if you're going to use that argument, shouldn't our progress be linear? And what I mean by that is, shouldn't we be progressively getting better as time progresses? But if you just look in the black community, you notice that that's not true. You notice that in the 60s, we were more educated. In the 60s, we were more married than we are today. So I pose that question. If you do think redlining and slavery is the reason why the black community is behind, then why isn't our progress linear?
Wait, okay, so I want to make sure I understand. So black people make up 13% of the American population.
Oh, 1350, my favorite.
Yes, exactly. Why do they commit 55% of all the murders?
Super great question. It's basically a very complex intersection of race and economic status. It's pretty well known that minority people tend to be in a lower economic status because of discrimination that they face.
So then why don't poor Asians commit a lot of murders?
Also a great question. Asian people weren't originally brought to America on purpose like black people, and they weren't already present here like natives.
Wait,
I'm not finished, please.
so blacks murder because they were brought here 250 years ago?
No, I would like to finish.
Okay, just answer. It's very simple.
I am answering.
No, I know, but you're not really.
I am. Asian Americans predominantly immigrate here for work reasons. They come from already wealthy countries. They're already wealthy when they get here. Crime is committed primarily by...
Nah, no, you just made that up. You just made that up. I'm sure, and I may be wrong. If I'm wrong, correct me. But I don't think majority of immigrants, whether they're Asian or Latino or black or white, are wealthy or come from wealthy countries. I don't think that's true. Because if that's the case, if they are already wealthy, why would they choose randomly to uproot their entire livelihood to come here? They're still human. Think about it in America. If we have a wealthy person or wealthy family, they're not just going to uproot their entire life to go to a different country. What?
So that's not true. Talk to anybody from who's Vietnamese? Anybody? Did your family come here wealthy?
No.
Yes and
not wealthy,
no. Okay.
but not...
Yes
I'm not
or
saying
no?
they come
No.
here... Okay.
The average Vietnamese does not come here wealthy.
I'm not... Okay, I perhaps misspoke. Not wealthy, but a lot of the... you complain about it all the time. A lot of the immigration from countries that border us, right? It's sort of desperate people who are of a lower economic status, right? And they're coming here for a better life.
So two things. Number one, there's been more blacks that have legally immigrated to this country in the last 30 years than were ever brought as slaves. That's number one. Number two, you still haven't answered the question.
I'm trying to.
Why?
It's a complicated answer.
Black people are only 13% of the population, yet they commit 55% of the murders. Why?
Because black people tend to be in lower economic statuses because of because of
Okay, no, this is
CRT.
fine. This is great.
Basically.
So you think that poverty
I would say this. The first part of her answer was correct. When you're in a lower income area, you are more prone to commit violence. However, trying to say that the violence is directly correlated to white people oppressing black people, that's just not true. That's not true. You said CRT. No, there's first of all, the average white person in America is not out here oppressing a black person. I'm pretty sure they're focusing on paying bills, going to work, having a good family. Like, they focus on regular human stuff. I doubt it. I truly doubt it that white people stay up at night and think about ways to oppress another race. I doubt that completely. And also, there are other races rather than just black and white. There are a plethora of other races and nationalities. I promise. So why is it when we have this discussion, we specifically focus on Caucasian Americans and African Americans? It's the weirdest thing ever. Just because someone is white doesn't mean they just have this mastermind plan on how to oppress black people. It's strange.
equals crime.
I think that it's highly correlated, and there's a lot of studies
This is where
on
we
that.
disagree. What an insult to the working poor
So
of this
why
country.
do you think black people commit more
Well,
crime,
first
Charlie
of all,
Kirk?
so let me ask you a question as
No,
my
answer
answer.
it. Go on.
What percentage of blacks have a father around when they're raised?
I'm not sure.
20%.
So that's why you
80% of
think it
blacks
is.
do not have a stable father around. It is the most predictable way to end up in prison, end up as a murderer or a criminal.
And why
It's
do
not a
you think that's
racism
a problem?
It's not a white supremacy problem. It's a fact that black fathers impregnate women and they don't stay around with the women
And
that they have
why-
impregnated.
Charlie
That's
Kirk,
true.
do you think that
Is-
that happens more in the black community compared to others?
It's threefold. Number one, we subsidize single motherhood. Number two, it's culture. It's accepted in the black community, and
Oh,
it
so
shouldn't
it's
be.
culture. Okay.
Don't take my
I
word
see.
for it. Read Thomas Sowell's own book on how black culture allows single motherhood to continue into a nanny state type practice. 75% of black youth are raised without a father in the home. 75%. Is that a bigger problem or not a bigger problem than whiteness, white privilege, or white supremacy? How
They
can
should
you
all
blame?
be addressed, and they're all related.
Okay, how is a white person to blame for the fact that 75% of blacks?
Oh, individual white people aren't at all to blame.
Okay, we agree.
Yeah.
So, but wouldn't it be more like smarter to be like, hey, that this is not about systemic racism. Like, stop impregnating your women and abandoning them.
Well, the way to incentivize not impregnating women and abandoning them is increasing access to healthcare, into housing, into
My thing is, why do you just assume black people don't have access to healthcare and housing? What do you mean? What do you think it means when he says government subsidized? That means you have free access to healthcare and literally free housing. Like, I can't put it any other way. It's government subsidized. It's free. Section 8, welfare, free. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm saying it's free. It's there. It's accessible 100%. But for you to ignore the fact that a culture can have a negative flaw is a literal form of dehumanization. Because if you look all throughout history, you can look at the Roman Empire, you can look at the Mongol Empire, you can look at the Chinese Empire, you can look at any empire, you can look at the Aztecs. Every aspect had good traits. Every aspect had bad traits. But for you to look at the black community and say, yeah, y'all are doing everything right, but you know, there are bad traits that I hear, but no way that you can possibly have any bad traits. We're human. Yes, we can.
everything that we know increases
so we've
those
done
outcomes
that.
for people.
So we have spent $30 trillion on the social welfare system since 1965. Black people are poorer, and the single motherhood went from 25% to now 75 to 80%. So the more money we've spent on black America, the less fathers we have, because black women divorced black men and married the government.
And do you think that's a problem inherent to black people?
No, it's not. It's happening now in white communities and Hispanic communities. It's just the worst in black America.
And why do you think that is?
Why is it the worst in black America? There's also a cultural problem. There is, and we have to be honest about it.
It's just that black people are
No, let me ask you a question.
Like
The average music that a black person in Compton is listening to, is it about contemplating the good, the true, and the beautiful, or is it about being a gangbanger and trying to get as much money and sleep with about as many girls as you can?
I would actually like to think I would be offended by that.
Do you think the average black kid in Compton is listening to Beethoven or some sort of gangster rap music that glorifies gangster culture?
Silly question. Rap wasn't created to glorify gangster culture. So even
Yes, it wasn't created to glorify gangster culture, but that's what it does. And I understand. I really do think this young lady has good faith. I genuinely do. But this is the problem that I see in a lot of college students who have these type of debates. A lot of them really do have good faith. They really do want to make a change, but it's the fact that they get on the stage and they unknowingly support racism or they unknowingly support ignorance. He's saying that the black community is overindulging in rap music which glorifies gang culture. That's true. It is literally a piece of black culture. And people who say it's not, you're lying. It is. Rap music is a piece of black culture. Whether or not you say gangster rap music is a piece, that's subjective. But rap is a piece. Same way R&B is a piece. But for you to just ignore that completely and say, well, maybe that, no, it's true. And I know it's true because if you go to a black school, who are they inviting to perform at their schools? They're inviting horrific, I'm not going to say horrific rappers, but rappers who push those type of images. They're not inviting classical musicians. They're inviting rappers, gangster rappers, inappropriate rappers to these schools. And that's what the kids like in the black community. Let's just be honest. That's what they like. That's the culture.
even though there is
Okay,
rap, I'm sure
you're not
that's
answering.
doing
You're
that.
dodging the question because.
Okay, I'm sure they're listening to rap.
Okay.
So you think rap music makes them leave their mom?
Do you think the cultural expectation in black America is that you stay with the woman that you impregnate?
No.
Within black communities? I can't speak on
No.
that.
Okay, the answer is no. It's not. It's
I
not
say no.
expected.
Okay, and do you think that is...
hold on, in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant communities, it's a
okay.
fact. Hold on. In upper middle class white communities,
Upper middle class. Say that part louder.
yeah, upper middle class white Anglo-Saxon Protestant communities, if you impregnate a woman, you are looked down upon and we do not think highly of you if you abandon the woman that you impregnate. That's a cultural difference. Has nothing to do with money. Has nothing to do with anything except norms. And the norms that have infected black America are destroying it from within. We need more fathers, not less. We need more dads around and less drag queen story hour. We need more young blacks to be able to look up to role models that are not leaving all the time and are not just saying, hey, I impregnated her, so be it. It's a toxin, and if we don't address that as the root cause, it's white supremacy, it's injustice, it's economics, we're dancing around the core of the issue.
I guess what I'm saying is...
Nah. Bro, I have to meet this man, bro. Even if you disagree with who charliekirk is as not a politician, as a public speaker, everything he's saying is 100% true. Every single word he just said. And it hits a chord with me because obviously I'm black. If you didn't know, I'm black. And when you talk about our issues, he's keeping it so real. And the words that he's saying, if we were to fix the issues that he's addressing, our community would be better for it. It would 100% be better for it. But the problem is you have the young women like her who are considered advocates, who are debating him when everything he's saying is facts. It is facts. If we had more fathers in the home, we would be better. If we promoted other music other than rap music, and I love rap music, I love it, we would be better. If we stop subjecting our children to this type of music, we would be better. If we had a culture around marriage, we'd be better. If we had a culture around higher education or picking up a trade, we'd be better. It's not about, whoa, white people are holding us down. When I hear that, that's the dumbest thing I can ever hear. Because we have other issues that we ignore and he's bringing them up and she can't accept it. But I'm here to accept it, man. Thank you for addressing it.
Right, and you've perfectly actually laid out the dichotomy here. It is a fact, obviously, that black people disproportionately commit crime in this country. No one's arguing that. But you either believe that that is due to a complex intersection of social, economic, and like leftover effects from previous inequalities, or you believe that that is an inherent trait to the race.
No, I don't. Because they weren't that way in the 1940s and 50s. Black America was one of the most peaceful, flourishing, fastest growing economically communities in the country. It's not genetic. You're trying to point something on me that I don't believe. Instead,
But then
Black
you do
America.
believe that it's
Hold
not
on.
genetic, so you do think CRT is correct.
Hold on a
That's
second.
kinda what I'm getting at.
In the 1940s and 1950s, Black America was prosperous and was on pace to be richer and wealthier than white America. More dads were staying with the women that they were with. There was monogamy. What changed?
You're supporting my argument.
No, hold on. But answer the question. What changed? Did America get more racist since the 1950s?
I would argue there were more racist policies passed. There were more
Hold on a
policies
second.
dedicated
In
to
the
lining
in the
up those communities
1950s,
and pushing them into poor housing and poor schools.
Wait a
Bro, what? Did you say? I can't do this. I can't. I'm not going to attack her as a person. I'm not going to do that. But I am going to say there's no way that you are really saying that there were more racist policies enacted after 1950 than there were in it. There is no possible way you're saying that.
a second. In the 1950s, Jackie Robinson had not even broken the color barrier. We had Jim Crow laws. We hadn't passed the Civil Rights Act, and we hadn't passed the Voting Rights Act. Yet blacks were better in the 1950s per capita than they are today. So we have become less racist. We've passed more anti-racist laws and given more stuff, and blacks are worse than they were 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Why?
So you're equating here institutional and social racism. Social racism was certainly worse in the 1950s. I'm sure everyone would agree. But institutional racism occurs when policies are
Hold on.
passed against people,
Come on.
which can increase
You're-
over time, and
you're-
it did.
You're not being intellectually honest. You know that. There was black-only drinking fountains in the 1950s. We don't have those anymore. Well, we're bringing them back with, black-only dormitories. But we had, for example, in the antebellum South in the 1950s, we had white-only communities, by law. We got rid of that with the Civil Rights Act. But it didn't, unfortunately, we look around, the numbers speak for themselves. Black youth are less likely to have fathers. They're not doing as well as far as economically. They commit more crime. So something changed. And our argument is what changed is three things. Number one, the imposition of the Great Society Project by Lyndon Baines Johnson of spending $30 trillion since 1960s on Section 8 housing, on welfare, on all sorts, where, as I said, that young black women married the government and they divorced young black men. And then we also have had as Thomas Sowell and as Clarence Thomas would say, the soft bigotry of low expectations. And we have been afraid to get to the root of the issue or even speak about it because we don't want to be called a racist.
So what is imposing those low expectations?
Part of it is like...
It's culture. It's culture. It's what we focus on, what we deem as important. Go to a black school, a predominantly black school, random, just pick one at random. What are the odds that sports will be more emphasized to the young men rather than education? And when I say education, I mean rather than having high grades and having good test scores. That is a cultural issue, and that is something that holds people back. Because if you look at sports, it doesn't matter what race or it's majority of people who play sports in the youth will not make it pro. However, in the black community, that doesn't matter. We focus a lot of attention on sports, and that is a cultural thing. That's why we have some of the most athletes in sports such as basketball and football, because we put a lot of our students into these sports. We don't focus a lot on education, which leads to making more money. So this is what he's saying. And you have to, I get that you want to be an advocate, but you have to acknowledge these type of things if you really want to help a community. You can't just blame everything on systemic racism or white people.
White academic culture. I'll give you an example. I'm not saying you believe this, but Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, has come out and said having an ID to vote is racist. That is code for saying black people are too dumb to get a voter ID.
You're doing it again. You're simplifying a very nuanced, complex argument from the real people who are making it.
Is voter ID racist?
Obviously not, Charlie.
Okay, all right.
Do you want to know where the argument comes from? I can eloquently tell you.
eloquently tell me why voter ID is racist or
Great.
whatever.
Certain
Yeah.
policies in southern states were proposed that would, like, I think the quote from the person who decided the case was, with surgical precision, target the times where black people were voting and make it like illegal or harder for them to get that to come at that time. And then they were targeting the type of ID that black voters had and making that specific type of ID illegal. That is racist.
Perfect.
No. Voter IDs in 2024 are not racist. Voter IDs are not racist. Having any person can get an ID. I shouldn't even have to say this. This is common sense. I'm black, and believe it or not, I have an ID. All jokes aside, it's not racist.
Perfectly fair. How does that impact today, saying that every citizen, if you need an ID to vote, just that aside, why is it racist?
Because we have to have, obviously humans are making those decisions, right? And so if there is still institutional racism and people in power that are racist, we can't trust those institutions to make those decisions without
institutional
discriminating against
racism do we
people.
have in this country right now?
What you just named it.
What?
1350.
Oh, well, I mean,
affirmative action needs to happen because there is not that many minorities in these higher educations or higher education institutions.
okay, so you're being clear, which is then you lower standards.
No.
Affirmative
I don't
action
support
always
that.
does. Affirmative action lowers standards by definition.
I'm saying why affirmative action was introduced. I'm not arguing for it.
Were you asking me why it was introduced, or?
No, I'm saying you
Oh.
agree that's why it was introduced.
Well, I agree why it was. I don't think it ever should have been, but yes.
Right,
I mean,
but there is institutional inequality, yes?
well, I wouldn't even use.
I think a better way of having affirmative action, and I think this would be extremely fair, is because I do think names can lead to racial bias. You can kind of guess someone's name you can kind of guess someone's race based off of their name. Not all the time, but my name is Jovan Hall. That's a predominantly black name. In most cases, I'm not even sure if that's true. Anyways, if we were to remove names from applications and race from applications, remove it completely, and then pick students, I think that would solve more issues. Because not only would there be no bias for how you look or how you act, it would be completely fair. It would be completely based off of your qualities as a student and your academic profile. I think that is the purest form of equality. Having no racial or gender bias at all. It sounds fair to me. Let me know what you think. But anyways, my name is Elifar Jojo, and I'll catch you on the next.